Who's on?
It's on.
Can anybody hear me?
No, they're not on.
All right. We're going to convene the finance/budget meeting at this time. We advertise this as a finance committee meeting, and so that's what we will do. We have on the finance committee Tamara Kowalski, Mr. Martino, myself, and Mr. Ratkev. And the other board members are members of the public per se, but we're going to treat this as a regular budget workshop in terms of format. And we will take public comment at the end of the meeting on anything that's being discussed. And we'll do our best to answer your questions at that time. So having said that, when we last met in February, the board had decided to bring back the kindergarten program and the athletics and clubs into our budget and use fund balance to address that shortfall. Having said that, Mr. Seldomridge, where do we stand now with any additions or subtractions to this model that you're going to discuss tonight? I know at the February meeting we did not have the swap fees in there, and I'm trying to think what else we did not have in there. We nixed the deference of the debt payment. I think that was about it. So can you get us up to speed from 30 days ago?
The things that have been changed since what was presented to you last month has been a change in the retirement subsidy because there was a change in salaries when you add kindergarten athletics back in. That means more cost to the pension system, which means more subsidy, so that was changed. The gate and activity fees were put back into the budget. Kindergarten and extracurricular and sport were back in the budget. Through further discussions with the administration, we were able to eliminate, due to declining enrollment, several positions in the middle school, the high school, and a couple of support positions as well. We also put midday kindergarten back in, and
you're talking about the bus run.
I'm sorry, midday bus runs back in. Thank you. I don't know why I keep saying that.
But it says midday kindergarten, right?
It does say midday kindergarten, and
but that's the bus run.
That's
right?
the bus run,
okay.
Right? And so where we stand right now is those are the changes that were made basically from the preliminary budget that was adopted in February. As you can see, our total expenditures with those reductions is at $53,573,208.
Mr. Seldomridge, can I ask a couple of questions real
Absolutely.
quick? First one I had was when we were looking at the net impact of the extracurriculars. My recollection was that we brought in somewhere around $350,000 in activity fees and physical fees and gate receipts, that offset the overall number that we see here of $800,000. And what I see on this sheet right now is 195 versus 800, which is a completely different number.
I went back and looked at the history of our revenue, and the activity fees and the gate fees combined are about $195,000. That's what we're estimating. It was budgeted around $200,000 in 2013-14, and I'm sure that I'm not sure where the other number came from, but I am sure that as far as the history of gate fees and activity fees, it's right around the $200,000 mark.
Okay. Second question. What's the one bus on here?
We were hoping to be able to eliminate 3 buses. Mm-hmm. We're only going to be able to eliminate 2 at this point.
I see. So you're adding back.
Correct.
Okay. Property services, $13 grand.
The property services and that deals with the leasing of the district office out to
the moving expenses.
Right, moving expenses, and also some increased energy costs to Amity.
Okay. And then the nurse, where's that coming from? Which building?
Amity Elementary Center.
Okay.
She's retiring.
Got it.
Retirement.
Yeah.
And then Has any discussion, I think Mary Beth, you and I kind of touched on this last week, with River Rock taking place that would influence the revenue stream that projected for them next year based on enrollment?
I don't have any figures to give to you at this point.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mr. Sullivan, did you also have the swap in here, the 330? I don't see that in this list.
I'll double check with Mr. Board, but I'm pretty sure it's back in.
It's back.
Not in this
It's
list.
just not on this list.
Right.
But it is on the analysis later on in the spreadsheet. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just real quick, the elementary teacher position, 87.4, is that a retirement?
No, that is not. That would be a furlough.
Do we not have to replace the nurse?
No, we have a floating nurse that we have kept in place, and we do not have to
Okay.
replace that nurse can fill the position at Amity Elementary Center.
And then we would not have a floating nurse.
Then we would not have a floating nurse, correct. So we would have, what we are going to have to do is figure out a way that each of these nurses now are covering the Immaculate Conception nursing time that we are required to provide, which is usually 1 to 2 days a week for minimal amount of time each time.
Okay.
So we do have responsibilities to that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
All right, I want to go over some of the assumptions that are being made in this 5-year projection because, again, one of the things you have to remember as a school board is with Act 1, you cannot turn quickly, use too much fund balance in any one year, and you have unexpected expenditures or loss in revenue due to either the state cutting back or a reassessment. You simply cannot turn as quickly as you could before as a school board. But I want to go over some of the assumptions for the future in light of that. We are assuming that in 2015-16 that there would be a 0% increase in salaries.
I'm sorry, you said 15?
And, yeah, 2015.
What page are you on?
Well, I'm on page...
You're in the local guy.
yeah, it's on the spreadsheet. I believe it was
The yellow spreadsheet.
page 34. And you can see down at the very bottom. I'm only going over the spreadsheet.
Okay, got it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'd be glad to go over any of the other material. Just give me the page number.
Okay, so you said 15, 16, 0%
0%.
in...
And we're assuming 3 furloughs because, as you can see, enrollment continues to drop. Our enrollment projections that were done show almost a 3% decrease in enrollment. If you look at the birth data that for Daniel Boone School District, there's been a 5-year drop over the past 5 years, obviously. And so the 2015 salary, which is obviously is the biggest part of your budget, which also affects your health care, your retirement, and your Social Security, which is about 68% of your budget, we're assuming a 0% increase with 3 furloughs. In 2016, we're assuming a 1% increase in salary, 2 furloughs.
Sorry, I'm
The
sorry.
following year, in 2017-18, again, 2 furloughs, 1% increase. And then in 2018-19, to play a little bit more conservative, we have a 2% increase in 18-19, 19-20, with 2 furloughs in 18-19.
Okay, so just to make sure I got this right, 15, 16 was 0% with 3 furloughs. 16, 17, and 17, 18 was 1% with 1 furlough or 2 furloughs?
2 furloughs.
2
yeah.
furloughs each year
Yes,
due to declining enrollment.
correct.
And then 18, 19, and 19, 20 was 2% each year, again with, was that 1 furlough at that time?
In 18-19, 2 furloughs,
2.
no furloughs in 19-20.
None. Okay. And I guess I suppose the question I have, if you have a 0% increase and you have 3 furloughs, why is that number almost flat? Because if you get 3 furloughs and furloughs around $300,000 or $100,000 to us in terms of total cost, why isn't that number going down farther?
Well, it's going down, what, 140,000. So we made an assumption that it would be a lot. Obviously, we don't know who it's going to be. The bumping rights. So we were conservative in those estimates.
So you were taking what, like a 3rd-year teacher or something like that?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that in each consecutive year?
Correct.
In that particular salary bracket?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on salaries?
01122.
All right, moving on. With healthcare, there is a 7% assumption. That's coming from BCIU, which is the consortium that Daniel Boone is a part of. The reason it's at 6.68% is, again, it's because we're decreasing staff. And then the assumption for the next couple of years is 8%. And then hopefully in 18-19, the reason that I only have a 3% increase in there is that there's going to have to be some drastic changes made in your health care so that you don't submit Daniel Boone School District to the Cadillac tax. And so there's going to have to be some major concessions made. Obviously, those concessions can be made earlier, but they have to be made by at least 2018 so you can avoid the Cadillac tax. So I'm making the assumption, some people might consider it a wild assumption, that you're only going to increase by 3%, but again, you're going to have to do something.
Do you have an estimate as to what we would increase by if we did not, or if we could not do an agreement where we changed? That would be like 15%. What would
It could be, I put it in dollar amounts because the excise tax is 40% above a certain amount in 2018-19. I don't have the exact amounts right in front of me. But for every position that you're over that amount by, it's 40% on that cost. So you could be looking, theoretically, you could be looking at anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 in a tax to the federal government.
Every year?
Every year that you're over that amount. And now that's indexed, but so your costs go up as well.
That's for full-time employees, right?
Yes. Now retirement, this is something I just can't cover enough. The retirement is not the school board's fault. The pension system. Mr. Basil, if you get elected to a state legislator, you know, this could be your number one, hopefully, initiative because, as you can see, your pension costs, which are dictated by the state, you have, as a school board, no control over it, is going up over $1 million a year, and that is with furloughs and hardly any percentage increase in salary. You have no control over that. You got to cover it. Social Security, I mean, that goes up pretty much with salary. That's basically goes to the federal government. Professional services are mainly...
Excuse me, go back to Social Security.
Sure.
You've got a huge jump in 14-15, which is totally out of line with every other year. Why is that?
That's because of tuition costs. There was basically part of that. That's a good question. A good part of that is tuition costs. There's also, you see Social Security / miscellaneous. There's a increase in the tuition costs contractually. Let me get a spreadsheet out here that helps with that. pass out, this is just some, it's on one of your slides. This is sort of a clear picture of the breakdown of expenditures. Thank you. In with Social Security is also unemployment compensation, and so a good portion of that, because you are laying off people, is not only tuition costs but unemployment costs that are going up. So that's the question.
With the 14-15, what was the total number of furloughs that we're looking at to date?
I believe it's around, when I counted the other day, it was around 7 or 8 furloughs.
And so the model takes into consideration the unemployment going, sequentially from year to year as that tapers off, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Professional services in 2014-15, that's all special education. Those are children that are going to special education classes. That's an expenditure that's really difficult to control from a school board standpoint. Obviously, if you have a child that moves in, and those are from actual numbers and costs that are coming from your IU, contractual special education services. So that's why there's a 15% increase this year. You notice the year before there was a 12% increase. That's how that varies. It goes up, goes down. It depends on the kids that come into your system. In property services, there's a decrease of basically 30%. That deals with a lot of your. Let's look at that. Oh, that's because of the rental. That's where your rental fees are. So your rental's going down for the district office. Let's see, tuition to schools. That's going down because of the number of kids. That's a good thing. Transportation is going down slightly because of the 2 buses. Supplies are going down. One of the things that we did this year as part of our budget process was we went to sort of a zero-based budgeting for the buildings, and we went in line item by line item, and so your supply costs are down mainly because of that effort. Energy costs, that's pretty much an average. When I look back over that number, I thought 22% seems high, but it is an average. Also, there's going to increase energy costs because of vanity as well. Equipment, the reason that's up is because you're replacing all your computers this year. Your computers are 7 years old, and unfortunately, they haven't been tiered in from one year to the next, and so all those the computers that are being used basically in all the classrooms, the cost of about $190,000 are being replaced. Debt service, fees, reserves, miscellaneous. That's basic. See what that's tied to.
What do we do with the old computers? Is there a way where we can try to generate some revenue by selling them? What do we do with them? We don't just throw them away, do we?
And I believe we have That answer in the audience.
Well, we transition them to the elementary. We go through a recycle program within our building. So wherever the oldest ones are, they get cycled out, and then if the next ones, aren't too bad, then they get,
The ones that are cycled out, where do they go?
They go to a room, and they are and they are saved for parts, or if there's things that they can do. But you won't find them in our dumpsters.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought the reason why we were cycling them out this year is because XP is no longer being supported.
Well, that answer I can't answer. So Scott,
Probably.
So wouldn't that,
Yeah, that is
wouldn't that mean we had to just get rid of them? They wouldn't be
is Scott here?
useful.
No.
Scott Madison.
He might not be. I will get that answer for you.
Yeah,
I know the
yeah,
recycling.
We consider it the third world countries.
Well, you can take them at the recycling center too.
Families that are needing like computer for their student. I know some districts do that. It's better than nothing, but I don't know.
Windows XP is obsolete.
Well, you can still use it, but you don't get this.
I still use it
yeah, Windows XP.
on my own computer, not at
It's done.
XP is no longer supported by Microsoft.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, it is. The reason the fees are up by 17% is we did increase our emergency reserve from 50,000 to 100,000. The reason that we did that is because when we went through all the line items with all the budgets, we took out all the contingencies, because you go to a department head or a principal and they say, well, what if my copier breaks, or what if this breaks, or what if that breaks, what if that breaks? And we basically have centralized that so that if anything comes in that's unexpected or in special education, there was costs there, because they have to build in contingencies. But it's inefficient if everybody's putting in a contingency, and so obviously we took them all out and increased the centralized contingency, so that's why that's up. Debt service, as you can see, your debt service is actually level. I was looking at it the other day. It's actually level to the year 2031. So it's basically that same amount going out for a long amount of time.
We increase our budget.
And there's no double dipping in there based on the issue that Mr. Basil was talking about. It's basically, you can see that we're assuming that it's going to be paid, July 1st every year. Real estate's a different story. If you look at your assessed value for Daniel Boone School District, it has been flat for the past 5 years. There was some significant growth in the early 2000s. The best I could, as I looked into it, I think most of that was due to the new homes that were being built during that time. But for the past 5 years, things have been flat. So the assumption for your real estate is that it's basically going to be flat. And I think that's, at this point, a fair assumption until something changes. Wage and income is, we're assuming 1% for the next couple of years. Hopefully things will turn around. But if you look at national statistics, the median family income has not increased since 2008. And so even an assumption of 1%, I think, is
aggressive.
A little bit aggressive. Delinquent taxes, again, that's an average, 5-year average. Same with transfer taxes, and the same with other local. And that's compared to costs from 2013-14. And states, I think pretty much the situation with the state. We basically put in what the governor has recommended to the legislature. Whether that gets passed or not, we don't know at this point, but it's the only thing that we have to go on. And basically, there's a huge increase in the Pennsylvania block grant. It's a reading block grant. It comes in different tiers. And I believe in talking to Mrs. Torcher, we have schools in tier 2, 3, and 4. Or is it? There's 4 tiers. I know we have nothing in
The
tier
top tier,
1.
right?
But it's based on the school
Yes.
school scores.
2, 3, 4,
Individual
yes.
scores.
Can I interrupt for a second here? So let me just ask this question. Did you guys, based on the K2, 3, 5 model that we heard about tonight, where there was a lot of discussion about using Title I funds to pay certain salaries and Title II funds, is that in here? Are those assumptions in this?
We talked about that today, and it was a change that is not reflected in here right now because we talked about it literally at the 11th hour, and that we need to look at how we're taking that Title I money and using it for 100% salaries opposed to what was done. So in essence, there's other fluff that's in there that will be taken out that won't have to be replaced, which would be, and I don't want to refer to after-school program as just fluff, but that was the way that we were using that.
Well, you're creating something in order to spend the money.
Correct.
So I guess what I'm curious about is, have you guys, do you guys have a rough estimate of what would the savings be in terms of salaries and stuff like that would be coming from Title I funding as opposed to local revenue?
Yeah, it's not that significant. The after-school programs aren't that much. It's pretty minor.
$100,000,
well, we would take the whole 300 is what I would propose, that we put the whole $300,000 that we get. Well, I lie, $346,000 that can all be used towards salaries, which has not been in the past.
That's small. That's $340,000.
46 of it has been used. That will continue. That's a Title II. That's a class size reduction that's been attributed every year to salary. But there, of the 300,000 in the past, only 70% of a salary was paid by it. Now we're going to be using the whole thing.
So really, it's what, 100? If you're only
70% of
right, so you have an additional 30% of the 300,000.
No. Only 70% of one person's salary was paid.
Okay.
So now we're going to be doing 100% of the
total
of whatever
funding.
I have going into whatever persons I have working in K-1-2 Title I. We are going to try to take their salaries out of the general budget and make sure it's being funded by.
Essentially, the revenue doesn't change, but our expense line should change, because we're not providing these additional services.
We are
the money's
not.
now being allocated towards salaries.
Correct.
So $300,000 is a pretty significant number, I think.
Right.
Am I wrong?
But part of it is just moving the dominoes around. There's only so much that you could take out as far as the extra program, and again, it's not very much. So it's just reshuffling who's getting paid from what. And as far as the positions, any positions that we, if you look at the one, page 2, there is some realignment of Title I monies in that cost there. There are some, what we felt was significant is already built into the budget. There may be some minor things that come out, but it's already been realigned in this budget.
So where would that be on this list?
There's the third one down, high school teachers and realigned Title I.
Where's?
On page 2.
Okay, so I see high school teachers. I don't see her. Am I missing realigned Title I?
No, it's the third. And after revenue, it's the third bullet down.
High school teachers.
Yeah, I see high school teachers.
And realigned Title I. I put those together because it was one of the.
Oh, I see. That's the same line item. I got you. Okay, all right. So I'm sorry.
And the high school teachers is only 2 part-time teachers, so most of that is the realignment of Title I that Mrs. Torch has been talking about.
Okay, I got it. All right.
We've not used the ABG grant as well towards tuition other than to support after-school program at Amity, which I would also put back into the budget to use towards salary. And if we would go to an at-risk kindergarten classroom, that could help to fund that.
What are the after-school programs that would disappear that we're talking about?
The after-school programs were a reading support program, primarily for Monocacy and Birdsboro, but because when you get Title I monies, you also have to have a comparable program at your non-Title I school. And what I would be doing is I would be keeping the 2 full-time reading specialists that are currently at Amity to stay there. We've been taking them away to help to support our 2 other schools because the need was greater, or not greater, well, the needier students were greater at those 2 buildings. So this will allow me to keep the 2 full-time people at Amity to take care of the 800 students that are in that building, and then we can look at what we need to do for the day, the instructional day.
So are you making the assumption that where before they were moving around, you weren't be able to provide certain services during the day, so we had this after-school
Correct.
program to provide that same level of service. So
Right.
now you're folding that into the regular daytime
Yes.
program, so we're not really losing it.
No,
We're just
not.
incorporating it as part
And
of the
hoping
regular.
to get a better bang for our
got it.
instructional buck, because
Okay.
I'm not feeling that we were seeing any great change in the students' growth by having them in an after-school program opposed to having them be supported during the actual school day.
Gotcha.
So will they now be taken out of the class to get their
Yes,
extra?
they would be supported that way, yes. So it's a shift of the monies that we do have that was typically being spent on materials or reading supplies or math supplies, etc., and the value that I'm finding is in salaries.
How long have the after-school programs been in place, you know?
They start somewhere around December and they run right up until we start taking
No,
PS.
I mean, how many years? I'm sorry.
As long as I've been here. So I want to say that is the way that my predecessor applied the monies that she utilized or had.
So rounding bases back again, full circle here to the budget. In terms of Title I and Title II, Mr. Seldenbridge, you're saying some of that's in this $159,000. However, we're sort of talking about a number of closer to 300. Are there additional monies that we ought to be, in terms of less expenses, we ought to be considering here? In terms of, is it another 50 grand, 100 grand? I mean,
Again, I don't think it's very much.
well, at this point, every $50,000 or whatever
You
it
may
could
be
be.
talking about $5,000 or $10,000.
That's it?
Yeah.
And that surprises me because your presentation, you talked about 2.5 positions being funded by.
Two, for sure.
Well, that's
Two that will get directly funded by Title I, which in the past only 70% of one person's salary was funded. So how that equates out,
I guess that's what I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out. So in this thing here, where it's $159,200 for high school teachers, 1.5 positions, was one of these 1.5 positions already as part of declining enrollment or a place where we thought we were going to cut, and then the other half position or the other full position is part of this Title I thing, and then that would leave this other question of this other position.
Yeah, there's two half-time high school positions that are due to declining enrollment.
Okay.
So that's probably about $50,000, or maybe a little bit more. The rest is due to the Title I alignment. And again, we couldn't put an exact number on it. That's what we're still working on, but I'm pretty sure that we caught most of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Just so I understand, 2 half-time teachers equates to 1 full-time teacher, and that's only $50,000?
Well, there's a big difference because you don't have any benefits with 2 half-time teachers. You don't have any health care, and depending on how half-time they are.
they do have full benefits.
Do they?
I was going to say.
Yeah, they do have full benefits.
We don't have benefits here, I don't believe.
Yeah, those two half-time teachers have full benefits.
Well, we'll have to take a closer look
Right.
at that then.
Yeah, that sounds like more than $50,000.
We'll
Yeah,
double
I
check,
don't think
but-
it is.
but, I
We
mean,
still pay their benefits, even in their halftime.
Yes,
They still get health insurance. and all.
yes.
Yeah, so it's more than that.
The savings or the
savings.
Yeah, the
No.
savings.
The savings
Because
wouldn't be.
if you get rid of them, if we're only taking into consideration their salaries, we got to take into consideration the benefit part. that may
Oh,
not
you're
be in
losing
here.
them all together.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were reducing them to
No.
halftime. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. I thought you were taking them full time and reducing them to halftime. Okay.
all right, I think we were on revenue, right?
Yeah, we're somewhere south of real estate.
All right, wage and income, we talked about that. Delinquent taxes, basically, that's an average over 5
No,
years.
no, I'm sorry, we were farther down. We were down like
Block grant, I think.
block
Block
grant, right?
Okay. Basic instructional is flat, special education is flat, transportation is based on a subsidy, a very complicated subsidy, I might add. Social Security, that goes up, they pay 50% of Social Security costs, obviously retirement, they pay, right now they're paying half of that, so that's why that increases.
And-
Debt service is pretty well fixed. Those ratios were set when the bond issues were done. And we're assuming a flat increase in federal subsidy.
So I'll go back to Mr. Bagel's question about where in the revenue then are we moving that swap money to?
I'll have to get back to you about the swap money.
Wouldn't that, I mean,
You're talking about the,
we're using $330,000 out of the debt service protection fund that has about $1.2 million in it that should have been allocated to cover debt service all along. I imagine up on your last line here, the $6.9 million, to cover the negative interest payments that we've been paying for the last, I don't know how many years. And so it's like a one-time infusion of cash from that fund to almost reimburse us for those expenses out of our operating fund that should have been coming out of the interest rate protection fund all this time. And so in terms of the overall debt deficit that we're looking at here, that'd be offset by those funds.
yeah, I'll check on that and get back to the board on the swap funds.
I don't know whether you put it up on reducing the debt service expenditure by that amount of money, or you're going to drop it in under revenue. I mean, I'm not sure how you would handle that because it's essentially working capital that wasn't allocated previously. Right. I think those expenses were showing up under debt service in prior years.
Where's that money come from?
Well, when we did the swap, we were paid an upfront amount of money that was set aside. It was about $1.5 million was set aside by the board to protect or hedge against interest rate fluctuations. So if interest rates were going up, we made money on the swap. If interest rates went down, we were losing money on the swap, and we'd have to actually pay the other holder of the note the difference in the spread, between the interest rate that we have and the current interest rates. So what happened was things went south, obviously, and the economy went south, and interest rates have been low for the last 8-9 years or whatever it's been since this thing was issued, and so we've been paying $30,000 a year in extra interest payments over, or sometimes more, a little bit less, ever since this thing was put into place, and that total number is around $330,000. And so the argument had always been, why aren't we using the interest rate protection fund to pay those extra interest payments instead of it's coming directly out of our operating budget?
So that money's sitting there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But it's there for a specific purpose, which is to cover. We had not been using it, correct?
Where is the swap fund now?
It's in one of our accounts.
But I mean, as far as is the district ahead or behind?
Oh no, we're underwater. Yeah, no, we're underwater. I mean, we've got the schedule of. You have the swap in here right now, don't you? On this, can I see that in your presentation?
Brian, while you're looking that up, we discussed this at the Finance Committee meeting. We could have been paying part of it.
That 30 grand or whatever.
30 grand a year, and we didn't do it.
Right.
So this year we were sort of reimbursing ourselves the $330,000 that we didn't take advantage of for the past several years.
Sure.
So that money, that swap money could be used for anything. It's just sitting there. I mean,
Oh, I thought it was specifically for
it could
that.
have been set aside for capital improvements.
You could use it really for anything, but it was specifically set aside in a separate account just to cover the interest rate fluctuations. And for whatever reason, the board, for years, I argued we ought to be using it, but we didn't. And as a result, we were paying extra debt service payments every year beyond our out of our operating account as opposed to out of this reserve fund. And we should have been using it out of the reserve fund.
If you're behind on the swap issue, shouldn't it stay in there for that protection?
At some point, well, I guess it doesn't really matter because that money was set aside specifically for this purpose of covering these extra payments, and we haven't been using it, so it's been coming out of our pocket anyways for the last 7-8 years, 9 years, or whatever it is. So I would say you'd want to spend that down first, and hopefully interest rates begin to rise, and it goes the other way. You get into the black again, and then you start receiving payments as opposed to reaching in your pocket. But eventually, I mean, I guess the question would be, how many years do you pay it out of pocket before you decide you're going to tap this fund? I would say you tap the fund first and then worry about paying out of pocket.
Yeah.
particularly now when we're, having, we're hemorrhaging expenses here. I mean, we need to be availing ourselves of these funds that are specifically set aside for this purpose.
Well, I certainly will review that this week and get an email to the board about using the swap payment. All right. With that being said, currently you're using of your fund balance $718,900. The balance of budget, that is with the 2.8% tax increase. And what you can see with the assumptions made on salary, with health care, we know exactly what the numbers are going to be with retirement. We're assuming that the assessed value for Daniel Boone is going to stay the same for the next few years. What is concerning to me, and I think should be to you, is that you can see that over the next 5 years, you will be tapping into your fund balance every year. And that's okay, but it's something that would be my fiduciary responsibility to make you aware that somebody like Moody's, Standard & Poor's is going to look at that and say, where's Danny Boone headed? Because basically your deficit financing for the next 5 years, and that's with this tax increase this year. The other thing I just want to sort of reiterate is I know that in past years you were told that there would be a deficit, there was a surplus. This budget was done differently this year. We went through and took a different methodology, again using zero-based budgeting for the departments. This is a tighter budget. I do not believe that you will see that negative $718,000 turn into a surplus. And so you need to be aware of some of those issues. Again, the other assumption that was made, if you look at the tax increases over the next 5 years, next year you're looking at possibly a tax increase of 3%, and 16-17, 2.9%. And so that means you would have to possibly use the exception if the average of the past 5 years for your Act 1 index of 2.5% comes into fruition. You can see that I assumed that it's going to be around 2.5% in 17-18 and 18-19, 19-20. Again, the Act 1 index is based on the state average weekly wage. That certainly isn't going to be going up tremendously, and neither is the ECI. And so even 2.5 might be a bit of a stretch when you consider what's going on. That leaves you, and the other key factor is, my recommendation is that you keep a fund balance of around 5% of expenditures. But even with this model of raising taxes to the index this year, and basically raising the tax to the index every year, you're still going to end up, mainly because of the pension costs, healthcare costs, you're still going to end up with a fund balance at the end of this year is about 2.5% of your expenditures. At some point, you need to turn that around. You can't keep doing what this model is showing. If you go to the next slide, this shows you what happens if you keep the same model in place, you don't do any tax increase at all, and you still have tax increases of the following year. By 17-18, you can see that you have the high potential of running out of money and going in the red. And that's at the bottom of the page. If you look at the ending fund balance, that sort of that gray bar, You can see that by 2018, with the same assumptions, no assumptions have been changed, you're basically looking at going into the red. And that's not your fault. These are costs that have been pushed to you by the state. There's not a whole lot you can do about the pension costs. I mean, that's over $1 million a year. You have no growth in your assessed value. You have, basically, we're keeping our salary at 0%, and that has to be negotiated.
Well, I was just going to ask you that question. I mean, if you're looking at a model that's showing, use of fund balance year over year over year, and even with a tax increase year over year over year, or I guess the only difference with the one below is you don't have a tax increase in the first year, but you do in subsequent years. Why on earth would we model increases in salaries going forward at 1%, 1%, 2%, 2% if you can't afford it?
Well, it's, I guess, what's realistic.
Well, what's realistic is you can only pay for what you have the money for. So if you don't have the money, you can't promise. I mean, that's the problem we ran into the first time. We made a promise to pay 6-7% annually every year, and we didn't have the funds to do that. So I'm not sure why, as a school district, we would, at least in this, for the sake of this model, sit there and say, well, you know what, we're going to go ahead and promise a 1%, 1%, 2%, 2% in terms of a theoretical when you don't even have the cash to pay for it. I mean, I would think you'd start with what your bottom line is, and you'd work backwards in terms of and taking a look at what you can afford to pay for. So if the bottom line says even with index increases in the tax to the maximum amount of whatever the Act 1 index is, and then whatever all of our assumptions are, and we agree to those assumptions, you work your way up to the salaries, which would say, okay, well, what can we afford versus making the promise first and then working our way down to see how much money we're going into the red every year. So I guess I would like to see the model work from the bottom up instead of from the top down, and see what the results would be. Because you can't make promises to pay people things that you don't have the money for, and it's not fair to them. It's not fair to the students. It's not fair to the board, or the taxpayers. I don't think.
Well, I guess what I'm looking at is what is the real world that you live in, and the school board runs against pressures of competition, of negotiations, and when you look at what other districts are settling, I just don't know how realistic it is to. It'd be nice to say, you know what, we can't afford it. There's not going to be any tax, or there's not going to be any salary increases for the next 5 years. I just don't know how realistic that is.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but if I'm to believe the model, even if we're raising taxes to the maximum amount, we still don't have the money to pay.
Right.
What? So 1%, 1%, 2%, 2%. So I mean, it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, I hear the pressure. We're going to go ahead and pay you anyways, but we don't have the money for it. So I don't know. I would like to see the model the other way around. We build up from the bottom, work our way up. And obviously, the PSERS is something we can't control from here, and we're making certain assumptions on real estate taxes and things of that nature. But I don't know. I guess the other question I would have in terms of the model itself, we're projecting declining enrollment over the next 5 years, where it's dropping 3, 2, that's 5, 7, 9, 11 employees over the next 5 years, not including next year, which is 8. So you're looking at almost 20 people over the next 5, 6 years. That's it, and I think your model showed that enrollment was decreasing down to, I don't know, like 3,000 students by the time you get to, which takes us back to like 1999 or something like that. And so I guess I'm curious, I know we talked about this K2, 3, 5 model, but at some point in here, if your enrollment continues to go down the way we're going, we've got to be talking about closing another building. And that's got to be put in this model somewhere here too. Is that near 16, 17? Is it in 18, 19? I don't know where it is, but it should go in there somewhere. And we know that there's a significant savings to be realized when you do that. Right. $800,000, I think, was the last number we had heard in February. So, and that's a number that carries forward year after year after year, and actually should grow because you're offsetting the costs in PSERS, the costs in Social Security, the costs in all that overhead. So that has a dramatic impact on the bottom line as well. And then last, I know it's a little bit more of a hypothetical than not, but River Rock has been pretty successful at all their locations, and I don't know to what degree that we have the growth in revenue or cost savings that we built into that lease, going forward year over year as well. I mean, we know we received $70,000 from them this year. It's anticipated 100 and something next year, and then at full capacity, it's like $250,000. So I think there should be some sort of line item in here. We need to maybe break it out separately, and we can talk about what those assumptions should be going forward, and maybe we'll have a conversation with Steve Castle about what his projections would be. I'm sorry, what?
Capaferi.
Capaferi, right. Steve Capaferi. I know Steve Castle. That's mine. And build that into this model as well. I mean, I think those few things are going to have a dramatic impact on fund balance and in the tax discussion going forward.
I just worked into the model 0% increases out to the future, even though I don't think that's realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I then took tax increases and kept them at around 2.5%. And you still end up with a fund balance at the end of in 2019-20 of 5%. And that's with the tax increase in this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be done.
And if you were to close a building down, I guess the question was...
If you close a building down, what are you saving? You're saving administrative position and some support staff.
Nurse, principal, custodians,
right.
Overhead in terms of energy costs, those types of things. Correct me if I'm wrong, we saved $660,000 with APC in year one. Obviously that number's higher in year two, higher than that in year three. When we were talking about BEC and the closure of that in February, you guys have presented to us something like an $800,000, I wrote it down here somewhere, like an $800,000 savings or cost. And so I'm just curious as to, I don't know how that works with this K235 model, whether that, that's even feasible, or you can still do I guess I would just wonder at the end of the day, you're down another 300-400 students. How long do you keep a building open when you really don't need it at that point? And I don't know, I'm not picking a building, I'm just a building.
The 300 kids aren't all in one building. It's across K-12.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I guess I'm just looking at the enrollment numbers, year after year after year after year, and they just, we lose 100 students a year.
Well, if you look at this budget, basically it's flat in the way of spending.
Mm-hmm.
So you really haven't even taken into any account large purchases. You haven't accounted for anything. This is just operating the budget flat for the next 5 years. There's no money put in here for large book purchases, big curriculum purchases for textbooks. How about replacement of equipment that the facilities have here? That's how we sort of got this boiler problem. But, there's no maintenance, very little maintenance. We're operating on what you have right now with no increases here. So,
well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think I'm in 100% agreement with you. I think what I'm doing is when I'm looking at the model and I'm trying to think about what are the realistic assumptions we ought to be putting in place, I guess for me, I'm thinking, okay, well, look, if you're trying to maintain a certain fund balance in terms of working capital, and I think it may be, given the constraints that we're talking about here, that we are running a lean budget, and maybe we ought to be putting more money aside and all those types of things. We've got to spend down the fund balance in order to accomplish those unforeseen type of things that come up. Either you're going to be designating some of the fund balance towards capital reserves or books or other types of things, or you're just going to take it as it comes. But either way, fund balance is going to get chewed up as you go forward. If you have the tax increase in here going forward ad infinitum, then all the more reason why we ought to be looking at 0% increases, and we ought to be looking at closure of a building if the enrollment warrants that. And I guess what I'd be asking the administration to do is kind of look at it and say, at what point when enrollment drops to whatever the number is, what is the number and what year does that happen where you would consider the closure of a building? How does it impact this K235 model? does it? Does it not? Do you work around it? Do you lump everybody into the same building again? I don't know what the answers are to these. I'm just asking the questions. But clearly, if we're trying to do a long-term budget and make decisions today about how we're going to set ourselves up long-term, I think we have to have those variables in as part of the conversation at least. I mean, have you given much thought to that?
Well, if enrollment declined that significantly, and I'm thinking enrollment you're going to see declining more so on the Amity side of town, because that's where we are seeing it affecting classroom size. I mean, when I started here, there were 9 fifth grade classes at Amity, and now we're down to 6. And we have incoming kindergartens of 5 classes opposed to, over the last few years, 6. But we've been pretty consistent at Birdsboro and Monocacy with the numbers of classes. We consistently have had 3 of each. Every now and then we have a growth in a grade level. So I would have to say if enrollment declined to the point where we were getting down to 4, 3, classes at Amity, even 4, 2, losing 2 every grade level, and still, having class sizes in the mid-20s like I presented this evening, then I'm definitely going to have to look at how does that K-5 structure work between 2 buildings, knowing that Amity is one of my largest buildings with, I think there's some, I don't want to quote a number of classrooms because I don't want to quote wrong, but I know that I have a lot of space there, and how would that, work? Do I, look at a K-1 program for all of the kids and then 3, 4, 5, or 2, 3, 4, 5 in the other? Do I look at really moving middle school, 5th grade back to middle school? I think I'm going to have to look at that as our numbers are changing.
You guys came up with these enrollment projections, so I'm just looking at it, and it's 1,500 kids in kindergarten through grade 5 next year, and that number dwindles to 1,200 kids over time.
Right.
And so that's 300 students. That's a building.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess I'm just thinking that we need to be preparing ourselves for that. We need to be preparing the community for that. Who knows? Things could change. Enrollment could go back up, but I think we need to have a plan in place, and we ought to be putting that as part of our budget model that we look at every year. That, hey, look, when is it? Is it 1,418 students? Is it 1,320? I don't know what the number is that you would shut down a building.
Yeah,
because if the cost to shut down a building are going to be a lot cheaper than busing kids, if you're going to move more kids from maybe it's from Union over to Amity, you know what I mean? Because that's going to be easy to do as opposed to shipping them down to Monocacy, and maybe Monocacy is the building that gets closed. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but
I think I'm going to have to continue to watch our kindergarten enrollment, and that's going to dictate, over time, what we're projecting. This is the first time we've had any type of 5-year projection of enrollment. So it's a new model for us. I will come back with due diligence and let you know. As I'm seeing the numbers, I'm going to be the person that's going to need to inform you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do the costs on this sheet represent? I know there's going to be an expense with the turf at the stadium. I don't know at what point that is. That's not reflected in here. They're going to have to raise the
With what?
Life of the turf is 10 to 15 years, so that would be in this model.
That would be part of the reserve study.
Okay, that's
right. Right.
If you can afford it.
Yeah, if we can even afford this stuff. Yeah.
But just for the sake of argument, it's up on the big screen. I took out. I put everything to 0. I took $300,000 out of salary 2017-18, assuming let's say you do close Birdsboro. And I put tax increases at around 2.5%, and you're still looking at deficit financing this year, next year, and the following year, and then the next 3 years. Yes, there's increases. You basically end up with a fund balance of around 6%.
So when you put in I guess in year 3, the closure of a building, obviously, things go the other way. Right.
So you could lower the tax increases in future years, but obviously you want to wait until that happens because if it doesn't, and you know you do it in anticipation of it, you're going to be in big trouble. But quite frankly, I think you know what I have up here now on the big screen is a little unrealistic. I don't think there's any district that's assuming that they're going to have a 0% increase in salaries for 5 years. And if you close a building in 2017-18, you can lower your millage increases. And I know that's a concern. I know it's been a concern of the board, and I understand that. I mean, you want to keep taxes as low as you can, but it's definitely not something you want to take it in bite sizes. You don't want to take huge chunks out of your fund balance in any one year because, again, your fund balance, especially when you're using it for recurring expenditures, it's a one-time source, and we all know that. And so, you know, with this model, even with this model, and making those assumptions, you're looking at you're looking at a $718,000 deficit for 2014-15, a $600,000 deficit for 15-16, and a $500,000 deficit for 16-17 with basically tax increases around 2.5%.
I don't want to minimize that, but compared to the last 5 years where it's been $5 million deficits that we've been wrestling with, I mean, that sounds like a breath of fresh air, quite frankly.
Thank you.
But in terms of the, and I don't mean to, make light of it, it's all very serious. But in terms of like the assumptions in terms of 0%, look, it's just a model. Clearly, if you're going to go in and negotiate a contract that's going to have increases, other things are going to be negotiated as well. It's contributions to health care. It could be tuition reimbursement. It's steps. I mean, it's a million different things that go into a contract that we'd have to sit down with our collective bargaining partners and negotiate. But I think in terms of just this model, which is comprehensive but still simple in design, I think you have to take some sort of rate and throw it in there and say, look, this is what we can pay for. So whether it's in salaries or it's in benefits or something else that you negotiate, at the end, the net is you can only pay for what you can pay for.
And you can only negotiate what you can negotiate.
You can't agree to pay somebody $1,000 if you only have $500, right?
And I don't want to sit here and negotiate in public, but there's other tactics out there that unions can use.
Sure.
And you know what they are.
Yep.
And they don't favor.
Well, I don't know what other people's thoughts are on it, but is it possible to get this Excel model emailed?
You should have had it. I mean, I gave it out to you, but I can resend it to you tomorrow.
Is it in Excel?
And again, you can play with.
Did you actually send? I'm sorry, Kim. Did you actually send the Excel, or did you send just a PowerPoint?
I sent the actual Excel, but let me send you the. I didn't send it with you with this budget in. So what I can do tomorrow is I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Okay.
With the new data in.
Yeah.
All right.
And it'll be unlocked that we can
Yes.
play with it? Okay.
Yeah. You can play with anything in the green bars.
Okay.
Like what was the last time? If you want to do other things, call me.
I won't mess with your mate. It's not like I can mess with yours.
Yeah.
I mean, so what are other people's thoughts on what we've heard tonight? Because, obviously we need to get some feedback here on some things, and then we can move forward and try to get some opinions from the audience. Do we need to leave that up there, or do we want to turn the lights back on?
Well, I can leave it up there for discussion purposes, but
Okay.
the two things I'm going to do is I'm going to look in the swap thing, or the swap money, and I will send a model to you tomorrow with the new budget in. And it'll
Check
be
on their salaries and benefits, too.
Pardon me?
You can check on the salaries and benefits, too.
For part-time employees.
Oh yeah, and I'll check on that too. Yes.
I mean, I had on my list the swap, the benefits for part-time employees. I don't know what the Title I, II, and ABG grant, whether that's significant or isn't significant. I would like to see a separate line item in there for the River Rock lease and how that might impact our budget over the next 3 years. And then obviously whatever, I know you just picked a time period in here in terms of 3 years and threw in a building closure. but maybe you guys can take a second look at that and say, okay, well, if enrollment does this, according to the schedule, this would be when we would talk about closing a building. And so at least we have a realistic input date in terms of this budget. Because that's significant. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
I think you have to have that in there.
Yeah.
So from my understanding, when you guys, it was going back to that 330,000 something that you said about the swap, that's not reflected in here.
That's correct.
We don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is, unless Mr. Boyer put it in somewhere and I, didn't.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we did.
I told him I was going to talk about him tonight, so I got to bring his name up at least once.
Well, you arrive at these numbers over time.
Right.
And I know how that goes.
You actually had 3 different people working on this. You had Mr. Yonkin working at it early in September.
Mark.
And then I came on with Mr. Boyer, so we had 3 different people, so it was just hard to get with, and Mr. Boyer and I sat down, we reconciled the total numbers. So I know that our total numbers are correct.
Okay.
It's just the pieces that we have to look at. I do want to double check with the swap. But I'll get that information to you.
That's a significant amount of money as well.
Sure.
But again, it's a one-time revenue.
Yeah, it's a one-time shot.
Yep.
And so I'll check on it.
Mr. Speed, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm scary as hell.
Okay. Mr. Rathgeb?
Some of this is revenue enhancement or not, but I know we had a couple times a conversation about maybe having some daycare facility come into one of the schools. I'm assuming that that's the case.
We have conversations.
We would charge some kind of rent for that.
Right.
So I'm wondering if that's another source of...
And I wouldn't be able to add that in until I would get somewhere a little bit closer. I had started conversation with the IU, so we'll continue to pursue them as well as the Y program. I'll go after them again.
Okay. Mr. Kurtz?
Yeah, Mr. Bailey, I agree a whole lot with what you were saying about figuring out at what enrollment do we have to close down a building, and not specifying a building, but just a building in general. I think that would be very beneficial, not only to the budget, but getting the community ready. And I think that is an aspect that we need to continue to discuss. And not only that, keep the board, I think, a little bit more unified too if we come up with the time in advance. I really like that.
Okay. Mr. Doty, do you have anything else?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Ms. Bites? No. Mr. Strowski?
Not that I can think of at the moment, thanks.
Mr. Martino?
Yes.
I saved you for last on purpose.
I was watching.
Oh, geez, he has a book over there. Okay.
I have a list, yes. I was hoping all of you would, too. Couple questions. The energy costs are up like $180,000, and that was because of APC, I believe is what I saw.
Part of it, yes.
Oh.
Is the 30% from River Rock included in that?
I don't think so.
Which would reduce?
I don't think any of the River Rock stuff is really modeled. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like it's modeled in here. If it is, I don't know where it is.
Reduce the energy cost.
Sure it would. Yeah.
We might also see a reduction in energy costs because of the boiler
boilers.
upgrade.
Yeah, because they're supposed to be high efficient boilers.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the River Rock jumped out at me because if they're paying 30% of the utilities.
I would request that you take a look at that, because I had asked Mr. Boyer to give us the budgeted cost for energy with APC closed versus when it was open, and it
wasn't that significant.
It wasn't that significant because
$20,000 or
it it wasn't really that much. So I was
wondering whether this $100,000 had something else in there, if this was a combined category or something, because that seemed like a big jump to me too.
It only says energy on here.
So that could be different.
Right.
The computer replacement. I sat as
It's
a
like
member of
$200,000.
public last year, and I thought Mr. Haas had said it would be sufficient to spend like $65,000 a year to replace computers, staged rather than this kind of money all at once. Did that change?
I can't answer that question. I will be able to look into it, but I can't answer that tonight.
Yeah, but I could have sworn that.
In fact, he
Do you
said
remember that too?
at the last finance committee meeting that he was at, I believe he even reiterated that. Did he not?
Yeah, that he could do it in a
Remember
stage.
something about
Unless he wasn't thinking about the XP going away.
Well, we also modeled some savings, and I don't know whether they're reflected in this budget either, whether Mr. Boyer had incorporated those things in terms of the voice over IP and some of these other things in terms of the phone system. So I don't know whether those are in or out.
Maybe that wasn't there was an upfront cost for that, maybe that's part of this?
It could be. I'm just wondering if it's in the tail end. The savings is in the tail end of the model. Over time.
Even the upfront cost, he had said that he had that money
It's like
in
a
his
3-year
budget,
payback, 2-3-year
that he could pretty
payback.
much fund that.
And that was for this year, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That voice over IP spec. Yeah.
Well, then there was another one that we were looking at a year or two out.
A year or two out.
Yes, and that's probably not in the budget.
Should be in part of the IT budget.
Oh, maybe, yeah, okay, that's true, because they would present it on
Couple personnel issues, Mrs. Torsia, that I just.
Can I back up to the
Yes,
computer for
please.
1 minute? I know that we are changing, or they're upgrading the software package that we are currently using for, I'm not 100% sure. I know that there's going to be a change in software package that has nothing to do with computers, and it's not the Windows. That could be an incurred cost that could be reflected there that they have to do, but I will double check that.
Yeah, I'm just going by what he had said last year. Basic skills.
Mm-hmm.
Are
That is back in the budget.
It's back in the budget, but
Yes.
didn't you say at the last meeting or the meeting before that you thought that could be funded by grant?
Well, it's all a matter of how the Title I grant is written. So it's either paying for reading specialists or it could pay for one math person because they would have to be at that K-1-2 building.
Where's basic skills reflected in this line item?
Basic instruction?
No, you mean in this.
The math, it's part of salaries.
Andrew's asking in this, though.
No, I'm asking in the list. Like, it's kind of the go-to list I'm referring to, and I don't even see basic skills in here. I mean, I saw the midday bus, but basic skills, that was like a $300,000 nut, right?
That was, I think there was a misunderstanding that the basic skills was never taken out of the budget. That has always been in the budget.
Okay, that's not what I understood. I understood
Yeah,
basic skill, and we've been telling people basic skills have been out since November.
And that was my assumption, and then when we went to check, it was,
So basic skills is
Money was
currently
still
in the
there.
budget.
Right.
And what is
This
the
also there because I went into Mr. Boyer's salary line item, or basically person by person, and checked, and those basic skills
Okay.
were
So
there.
you're
So
saying
I
the only
think
thing is elementary band is the only thing that's,
and the
Right.
middle school team.
well,
for the middle
But
school
that's
team,
due
they-
to
that's-
declining
that's
enrollment. That's declining enrollment, right. Only other
elementary
program.
band is the only program.
Only
that-
other
that
program,
we're
yes.
actually-
Okay, so what is the nut for basic skills?
You mean how much is it?
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that we're right on the
Talking about-
terminology.
Yeah.
I've heard of beans, but I'm not sure.
To flesh it out.
I know, I was just going to say, don't even go there.
He prefers nuts over beans.
I don't know. If I'm putting on your spot, I'm just curious because I don't know. We talked about this in November. We talked about it in January. We're negotiating things like this, and I'm just, it blows me away that that's in the whole time.
Good thing I had a list, huh?
I don't know why I'm looking at that.
Mr. Silveridge is looking at that. A couple of personnel issues. And I understand what you were doing, trying to balance the class size. Just looking at total students, how many lost 44 students? There's no loss of teachers. And-
Where are you losing students?
I'm looking at total.
Okay,
Total grades 1 through 5.
right,
So you don't know the kindergarten enrollment yet. So
correct.
That may be more or maybe less teachers.
Correct. And what I did in the slide presentation was I showed you what it would look like if you lost an additional teacher at any grade level, how it would impact class
They
size.
would put it up to 26 in some cases or more.
Right, yeah, which is significant.
Basic skills is 350,000.
Right, now we have that on that list as being out.
Yeah, that's on this list, but on another document, I had that basically scratched out.
So it's 350,000, you said?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
You're good.
Between that.
I do remember my numbers,
And
but,
that's 4 people.
well,
But
it just seems to me like we talk about it being out, we have spreadsheets telling us it's out, and then it's really in the whole time. And I get it, there's a mistake, and we got different hands in, in
I'd
the
like
dough.
it to stay in.
But I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but I think as a board, we need to know what all the options are, what's in, what's out, and what do they cost so that we can make some decisions.
I assume we were, to try to get that back in, we're going to have to find that somewhere. Right? Now, you're telling me it's
There.
already in the number.
Right.
So that's in, swaps out, and that's okay. Anything else that we should be aware of that's on that list that we thought was out, or
Who's on first? That's all.
I mean, you have that list in front of you, Mr. Selmridge. What did it say there for the gate fees and activity fees and stuff like that? There should have been a
Gate elimination.
should have been a loss in revenue and then a loss in. I didn't bring that spreadsheet with me tonight, so I couldn't.
It's 170,000.
Is the revenue? Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
From gate receipts and activity fees.
I mean, basically, with the basic skills, I was being told that when I went in specifically and looked at it to reconcile the numbers, and they're there. So
Okay, is there anything else on that list that
everything? I mean,
everything else on that list is out?
yes. And it all basically deals or is related to reduction in enrollment.
Other than ban.
Okay. Mr. Martino, what else do you have?
Just to finish this up, and I realize we're not finalizing anything tonight.
No, I'm just.
If I have what I wrote down correct, we've got a potential of $330,000 from the swap money. We've got potential from the Title I and Title II salaries and the high school half teacher benefits. And we've got potential energy savings from the 30% of River Rock with the APC. So our expenditures could come.
And IT.
I'm sorry.
And you have a handful of money in IT.
So these numbers could change dramatically. I mean, we're looking at $500,000.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I've got a couple of personnel issues that we'll discuss in executive session.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's not for here. Okay. Anybody else have any comments on? All right, because I'm going to open it up to the floor then.
Just so you know, I don't know if it's I found a different document, but
Yeah, that's
the
the-
gate fee was $55,749 last year, and the fee for
Physicals?
was $139,995.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Can we get the lights back on? And then, if there's anybody still out there, I can't tell. If you have a comment, you can come up to the microphone and make a comment.
We didn't are storing out there either, so.
And we can probably raise the. No, I guess it doesn't matter.
I could do that.
Oh, can you?
people are
Good,
left?
because
We got 4 people
Yeah, I
left.
think I know how to do
Sandy was telling me, and
With your maybe a closing of the building, I think the problem that you're going to have is you're losing enrollment in your middle to high school grade level. There's a 30 kids increase in kindergarten this year. So your numbers were wrong for kindergarten this year. So you would have to lose 30 next year just to be at your level of what you thought your enrollment was going to be for this year.
it's actually 40.
There was an article in the Reading paper about that Berks County had a 1% growth. Union Township just started a development of new homes. I think where you're going to find a problem with closing a building is they're in the wrong grades. Your elementary enrollment is kind of rising.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you, Mr. Cockle. I think that I'm looking at the projections we have in terms of birth rates and things of that nature. So birth rates obviously going to impact your kindergarten. And, what we have projected here is this year we have 246 kids in kindergarten. As you go out, that number drops down to 193. And so, it's consistent across the board in grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The total number drops from almost 1,600 students down to 1,200 students. That's 400 kids. That's a building. So,
right, but those are potential numbers.
Yeah, look, I mean, they'll change from year to year, but and so maybe you're not. If you're looking at this schedule and you're going to say, okay, well, according to this schedule, you're looking at a building closure. I'm just going to pick a year, 17, 18, right? And then every year you look at it. And so maybe, in 15, 16, it's not 17, 18 anymore, it's 18, 19. Or if it's more significant of a decline, you're moving it up. I don't know, but you have to have that on the horizon as part of a discussion and be planning for it in terms of your budget, because if things continue to decline, well, sooner or later you're going to hit that, right? And so you have to be prepared for it. We could be surprised. I don't know, but I just think that in terms of our model, it's something you can't ignore.
Right, and I think
Mr. Cockle, as you say, if development does start, and all of a sudden we get an influx of houses and enrollment increases, well, then obviously that would change everything. But right now, that's not the case.
Right, and I guess my point is maybe you should look, instead of focusing on closing a building where the enrollment is steady and growing, and look at your options of the other end.
That's what I'm saying is, according to our projections, enrollment isn't steady and growing; it's decreasing. So we had a population bubble, right? It started off in kindergarten, moved through elementary. It's now in the. You're probably part of the bubble, right? Your kids. So they're now they're in the high middle school, low high school level, right? 8th, 9th.
High school, middle school, and elementary.
They're not. Yeah, well, you covered the whole spread, but they're up. Our population bubble is a little bit higher up, and it's not bimodal in terms of distributions. We don't see another wave yet coming behind there. It's still dropping, and so I don't know what to expect. All I'm doing is looking at the numbers and just saying, look, if this is what we're projecting year over year over year, and it's showing a decline, then we just need to be prepared to have that discussion and model for it. That's all I'm saying. If the model shows it's going the other way, well, then heck, we got to be talking about moving River Rock out and opening up, APC again. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it's going to show us, but
you're just looking kind of for like a line in the sand where if we get to that number,
yeah,
that's.
I think we need to communicate that to the public too, and say, look, if our enrollment hits X, we got it's a responsible thing to do is to shut down a building. I mean. And so people are aware of it as you get closer to that number. Maybe it doesn't pan out like we think it's going to be, that they're spread out all over and you can't consolidate, and maybe you don't close it down. But you certainly got to be having the conversation ahead of time.
Right. And that might come back online.
And you are. I mean, I looked at when we were having the conversations too. I looked up the capacity of the middle and high school, because you're right. We are going to have a big decline there too. But not big enough that you can necessarily combine the two into one school. But maybe you put fourth and fifth grade in the middle school and you close an elementary. I don't know. But you're right. We have to look at all ends of it. But it's going to be a matter of trying to figure out. I mean,
right now today we are at 2004 levels in terms of our student population. And
understand the enrollment projections right now is based primarily on birth rates. People moving into the 3 municipalities with kids would change that.
Right.
Houses being built would change that, but right now all we have is the data.
How many kindergartners do we have right now?
Currently we have, I shouldn't have shut that out already.
Currently we have 246.
Yes, 240, 46.
A 15% increase in kindergarten.
No.
We added the equivalent of one. Well, we added 2 classes in this school year that we weren't anticipating. We added a extra half day at Monocacy and an extra half day at Amity.
Right, and my point is, is you have a chart that you're going by, and then there's the actual number. You know, and you had a significant increase this year that your numbers were wrong. And that's the only thing I'm saying is it's a model, it can change, it can grow. You know, and that's something to be careful of when you start talking about closing the building.
Yep.
And I thought APC was, the closing, River Rock was going to be paying 41% for utilities, not 30.
I'd have to look at the lease.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it's 41.
It's based on the square footage of the building.
Right.
And I want to also bring up the minutes again, where we'll have to go back and look at what you talked about, the computer.
Yeah, well, we've got them all recorded for the finance committee meeting. So.
And that's another good reason to keep thorough minutes and the recording, so we can go back and revisit what was said for people that are no longer here.
Yep.
There's no one arguing the thoroughness of the minutes, Mr. Conkle. It's just the quotations and the accuracy of the quotation.
Yeah, so
There's nobody debating that we don't want thorough minutes, okay?
Okay.
For the record. Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Shane?
There was one other thing, but I lost it in my notes. So I guess I'll have to.
Save it for the next time.
I'll save it for the next time.
So remember, you only
Thank
get
you.
3 minutes at the beginning.
Appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none. Board, anything else? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.